This is GW, actually autistic advocate and content creator. Now, most of you may have heard of this term before, ABA therapy. And for those of you who don't know much about it or what it does, the gist of it is that it's generated a lot of controversy in the past several years. ABA is an acronym that means Applied Behavioral Analysis. And the definition of this form of therapy is exactly how it sounds. In general, it's a type of therapy that analyzes the behaviors of autistic children and how therapists, parents, and teachers can use that type of analysis to better shape how their autistic children behave and interact in the real world. Now, I've been following ABA therapy and its controversies very closely. And just for the record, while I am not at all an ABA therapist and do not work with children with disabilities in either a therapist or teacher setting, I have been conducting a lot of research on ABA in the past year or so. And truthfully, while there are a few highlights to how it helps autistic children, there are also a ton of lowlights, or in other words, dangers to it that can pose significant harm to autistic children. And with that research, I've also been reviewing videos from my fellow actually autistic advocates talking about ABA on TikTok. So that means for this episode, I'm going to review several videos from these advocates I follow and fact check their statements on ABA, as well as dig deeper into the points they do make about the therapy. And like I said, I'm not a disability therapist or teacher, but I will be applying the research that I've conducted to objectively review each video while respectfully pointing out the potential inaccuracies my fellow advocates have made when sharing their thoughts on ABA. And this is not to be disrespectful to them at all. I love and care deeply about them. But as autistic content creators, it is our duty to make sure we correct each other whenever we may say something false or inaccurate. Before we get started, please be sure to like and subscribe. All right, let's get to it.
I think I found a way to explain why ABA doesn't work and why it sucks. I want to start off this conversation by saying, moms of autistic kids, you are doing your best and I love you.
I like what Paige Lael does at the beginning of this video in giving off a more calming tone before she explains why she doesn't like ABA. When explaining a controversial topic that you don't like or have ill feelings about, it's best to ease your audience into it instead of just yelling or screaming why you think something is bad, because that may do the opposite in getting your message across.
ABA is kind of like teaching. It's a type of teaching. It's a method of teaching. It's teaching to do life skills, to gain independence. In my autistic opinion, ABA is one of the worst ways of teaching an autistic mind. And yes, we are talking about the good ABA, the best ABA, the epitome of the reason why people do ABA.
As much as I do think, from the research I've done at least, that ABA is not one of the best ways to teach children with autism, according to multiple autism and psychology related sources, it's actually not one of the worst, believe it or not. Because ABA therapy is considered a treatment for autism, there are far worse treatments out there for autistic children, including naturopathy, chelation or detoxification, hyperbaric oxygen, chlorine dioxide or bleach, chemical castration, and even stem cells. There are even fake therapies that have circulated online about how to treat kids with autism, including therapy that idolizes a cure for autism and giving your autistic kids too many nutritional supplements to so-called prevent their autism from showing up. Newsflash, you can't prevent autism from showing up. Now, in Paige Lael's defense, however, she does have every right to say that ABA is one of the worst therapies for autistic children because, unlike the several other bad ones I just mentioned, ABA is still, to date, the most common and most popular method for treating kids with autism when it comes to analyzing and evaluating their behaviors and mannerisms.
I have taught hundreds of autistic kids, and like non-vocal, iPad communicating kids, autistic teenagers that were still in diapers. I am telling you that there's much better methods of communicating and teaching autistic kids that's faster and cheaper and easier and healthier and happier and will actually influence the autistic person to make those choices by themselves later on because they understand why and they want to.
And frankly, Paige is right. There are so many other alternatives aside from ABA, including occupational therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, floor time therapy, music therapy, and play therapy. And most of these therapies don't include the extreme initiatives of awarding and physical touching that you commonly see in ABA practices. When I was in grade school, my go-to was occupational therapy. I loved it so much, and it helped me in so many ways to interact with kids my age, especially with my peers in class. Before occupational therapy, I had so many issues with socializing and interacting, which was mostly due to my autism. But occupational therapy helped me in a way that didn't require any awards or physical contact with your therapist.
I loved ABA because I loved being praised for following the rules. Did that build me any skills for life and independence? Absolutely not. It built a compliant kid.
And what she says right there is a big issue that most people have with ABA, and that it basically forces autistic children to behave and act a certain way in what therapists consider normal. In other words, many parents with children on the autism spectrum say ABA has led their kids to have trouble interacting in a neurotypical manner when they know they're being kept from just being their regular, autistic, and neurodiverse selves. This negative effect may not show up when they're just kids, but it'll most certainly show up later on in life. I really like this video from Paige. She definitely hits it right on the money with most of what she has to say, except for that one small part when she thinks ABA is one of the worst treatments for autistic children, when other studies show there are far worse that are certainly not as common as ABA, but still much worse nonetheless. But hey, I'm just being nitpicky. Overall, out of 10, and based on accuracy, I would give this video a 9.
I'm going to share my thoughts on ABA therapy. It's abuse. I don't care what you'll say. I don't care what ABA therapists come up in my comments going, oh, but it's different. Oh, but you really don't understand what it is. I don't care. ABA therapy is abuse.
First of all, I love Chloe. She's such a prominent figure in the autistic community. And just in case you couldn't decipher her accent, she's Australian. And she's also in this popular Netflix teen drama series, Heartbreak High. And while I love her so much in her advocacy work, this comment that she said does draw some red flags. Yes, she is correct for the most part when she says ABA is abuse. However, saying just that can come off biased, especially when considering the select few types of ABA therapy that aren't harmful and aren't abusive, like teaching autistics basic life skills that we all need to get through our day. Again, I agree with her. ABA does have a lot of wrongs. But saying up front that ABA is abusive can be misconstrued to the point where parents and other advocates potentially harm ABA therapists, especially those who aren't using abusive practices. And on another note, her shouting and yelling doesn't help either. I understand it's supposed to be passionate, and she's trying to get the point across of why she doesn't like ABA. But the best form of communication she needs to be doing is just like what I showed with Paige. She needs to say up front in a more calming, informative manner that many ABA practices are very abusive and harmful, explain why that's the case, and then provide resources on better alternatives to ABA.
ABA therapy teaches autistic children not to stim, it teaches autistic children to act normal and to suppress anything that makes them autistic. Almost half of people that have done ABA meet the criteria for PTSD.
So a couple things I want to go over with what she said here. The first thing is about her saying ABA teaches children not to stim. Part of that is factually accurate and part of it isn't. According to several resources about ABA therapy online, the primary goal of ABA is to regulate stimming slightly so that it doesn't lead to harmful behavior. Like if an autistic is stimming so bad from a freak out or panic attack that they potentially pick up a knife or start swinging their fists, making them a danger to themselves and others. Now, to Chloe's point, as much as ABA's goal is to regulate stimming, they don't do a very good job of doing it. Most ABA sessions regulate it so much to the point where it truly does teach autistic children not to stim. So whether it's an ABA or some other therapy, I don't know, we need to find a method to regulate stimming just enough that it meets in the middle, where the stimming isn't a danger while not being fully eradicated. The second thing from Chloe is when she talks about nearly half of people who have done ABA meeting the criteria for PTSD. And it turns out she's absolutely right. The most recent scholarly studies on ABA and its link to PTSD show about 46% of autistics who did ABA later experienced signs of the stress disorder. And even though the exact cause of why ABA does this is unclear, it's believed to be from several ABA therapists allegedly controlling autistic children and their behavior during therapy sessions. This is an okay video for the most part. A couple things are factually correct, but some points are also slightly overblown, which hurt its accuracy. But I know Chloe only means to get her point across, even if her tone isn't the most effective way to communicate. Out of 10, I would give this video a 6.
The desire to make autistics compliant and non-disruptive is a large part of why the prevailing treatment for autism in children is applied behavior analysis, or ABA therapy. ABA is focused on training autistic kids to fake a neurotypical personality.
So this lady right here is reading some parts from the book called Unmasking Autism by Devin Price, who's a psychologist and blogger who frequently writes about autism. I've never read the book personally, but I have heard some good things about it, so I definitely do need to read it at some point. But in this part of the video, she's reading an excerpt from the book that basically describes how ABA's end goal is to control autistic people by making them compliant. And regretfully, ABA does a lot of that. I pointed out before the few positives of ABA, but these other goals Emily was reading rationalize the many negatives surrounding it.
As long as the autistic child's outward actions change and become less disruptive or more normal, it doesn't really matter to the ABA therapist what's going on between the kid's ears.
I don't want to completely quote Emily on this because she's just reading an excerpt from a book, but that statement right there is true. And when we see that ABA therapists want to make autistics or want to make us, quote, normal, then we need to sit down and redefine the word normal. Because honestly, what is normal? What I'm saying is that based on this excerpt she's reading right here, it appears that ABA treatment can really only be used to regulate harmful behaviors. But we shouldn't be changing the way autistics act during therapy in order for them to be part of a society that therapists view as normal. You know, this video definitely hits the nail on the wall when it comes to talking about ABA. And while I don't want to quote Emily directly on the facts she's stating, since it wasn't actually her words, it's still informative nonetheless. Honestly, I give this video a perfect 10 out of 10.
I'm not a fan of ABA. The creator of ABA did not respect autistic people or see them as real people.
So the creator of ABA is a guy named Ivar Lovaas. He's no longer alive, he passed away years ago, but he was a clinical psychologist who has been widely credited for developing programs for autistic children through prompts, modeling, and positive reinforcement. He initially received widespread praise for his groundbreaking treatments for autistic children at the time, but in more recent years, his methods have come under scrutiny. In an interview with Lovaas from decades ago, he talks about spanking autistic children, electric shocking them, and restraining them to obey commands from adults. So yes, what this parent just said in the video, it's unfortunately true. The way you show your respect and love towards autistic people is to use treatment that benefits them and not treatment that harms them.
ABA belongs under a family tree of therapies that are compliance-based behavior modification therapies. They are behaviorism therapies.
So behavior therapy is mostly used to treat people with a mental health disorder. In this case, this woman's talking about behavior therapy being used to treat autistic children. And behavior therapy, in layman's terms, is just analyzing a specific behavior and finding ways to change it, just like ABA. And from what I believe, from what she's saying, this woman is advocating for alternatives to ABA, most notably cognitive therapy, which has similar features to ABA, but it's a little different. First and foremost, cognitive therapy is not considered a harmful practice or treatment towards autistics. The therapy sessions are done in a more structured way, and the treatment overall requires less therapy. And secondly, unlike ABA, it's been shown to not analyze behavior and then drastically change it. However, it analyzes behavior to point out verbal and communication challenges in autistic children and therefore make slight tweaks to those behaviors.
You're not going to get away from ABA. Every special ed program in America is steeped in ABA philosophy and interventions. You may go to an occupational therapist because you don't want to do ABA, and if you go in there and you watch them what they're doing, you're going to find, oh, some of them are doing ABA and they don't even know it, because it is steeped into the foundation of autism therapy in this country.
And that's correct. ABA therapy, no matter how bad or how good you think it is so embedded in autism culture when it comes to therapies and treatments. And while I would disagree with her when she says ABA is impossible to escape, I would say that even if you can't escape it, no matter how hard you try, it would still be ideal to talk to and consult with autism therapists in your area to find the best type of therapy for your child. You know what? Fantastic video from an actual parent of an actually autistic child. Facts were right with a balance of her own opinions that still contain elements of relevant information. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
I was diagnosed with autism at age 2.5, and the doctor who diagnosed me said that I wasn't going to be able to do anything or be independent, and suggested that my mother put me in ABA therapy, which she did for a couple of weeks, only to pull me out of it when she saw the emotional stress that ABA therapy was having on me and the other autistic students in the school.
Love this guy, friends with him on TikTok, makes my day whenever I see his videos. But to his point right here, this is a prime example from a primary source. In this instance, someone who's autistic who had a poor experience with ABA. Kind of like what I was referencing from the previous videos, ABA can cause emotional stress in several autistic individuals. Not all of them, but a good chunk. And it's important for parents to recognize the stress and have them either be pulled out of ABA entirely or have them see another therapist who specializes in applying different methods of ABA.
It focuses on one right answer, not on the fact that there can be multiple answers to problems, which is exactly the reason why my mother and I decided to do the RDI program, something called Relationship Development Intervention, instead of ABA therapy, starting from when I was 9 years old until now at age 26.
Going off of what Jake was just saying, RDI has proven to be a strong alternative to ABA. According to the resource page on the Autism Speaks website, RDI is a family-based behavioral treatment which addresses the core symptoms of autism. Its primary goal is to develop children's ability to think flexibly and handle social situations. And as a matter of fact, according to its history, it was developed in the 1980s as a counter to ABA therapy.
While doing the RDI program, not only did my mother learn how to be an effective guide to me, I've also learned the benefits and value of coming to different interactions, engaging with all of the people in my life so that I can learn from them about the world around me.
And this piggybacks to what I was saying from Paige's video. There are so many alternatives to ABA, like RDI, that can not only help autistic children, but the parents as well. Overall, great video, very informative, and by the way, I'm not being biased in favor of him just because we're mutuals on social media. I say this objectively. This was a great video that gave his honest opinion of why he thinks ABA is just not the best option for autistic children. He then backed his opinion up with his own personal experience with ABA, gave some facts about it, and then informed the viewer of a strong alternative to it. So this one, gotta go with a perfect 10. My final message on this topic is to my fellow autistic advocates and content creators on social media. We have a job to do and a mission to accomplish, and that is to provide the most acceptance, awareness, and inclusion in the autism community as we can. And with that also comes providing the right resources for autistic children and parents of autistic children on what therapies and treatments are best. And I understand most of you who I follow have sharp criticisms on ABA and its services. But it's also about using a communicative approach when expressing your beliefs. It's not just about shouting or passionately yelling your opinion and the facts that come with it. It's about bringing people together by expressing our views in an informative tone. We need to think about and listen to the other side of the argument, see through to what makes ABA and other controversial autism-related therapies potentially harmful, and then come together to find out how we can learn from those dangerous methods to improve autism therapies across all sides of the spectrum and all areas in neurodiversity.